Hello and welcome to Astrology in the News, and today is April 6, 2018. And of course, thank you so much for joining me. If you would like and subscribe, I always appreciate it. So, starting things off, always as usual, we have Yogic Wisdom of the Day. The body is your temple. Keep it pure and clean for the soul to reside in. Unless you're Keith Richards, who that temple's been kind of burnt down a little while ago, and gravity's starting to take in effect, and yeah, maybe want to get some plastic surgery on that temple to get it remodeled. Anyway, Tiger Woods is making a comeback. This is so great to see, especially because he's been recovering from his crazy sweet addiction now for a couple of years, and I tell you, some sports stars should not get married. Actually, most sports stars should not get married because it screws up their game, Till you put in the female factor, it goes. Anyway, looking at Tiger's chart. So he was born in 1975 in Long Beach. And so some of the things that he has going for him now, when we talk about like infidelity, really what we do is we look at the 8th house and we look at Scorpio. So we're not necessarily looking at somebody who is an infidel. Now, really, some people have stronger sex drives than other people, and one person probably gets them bored in the bedroom. So when we look at that, we look at Scorpio here. So Scorpio is this sign right here. We have the Moon, Neptune, and Venus all in the sign of Scorpio, and this kind of shows how he loves. He's really very passionate lover. Scorpio makes somebody very passionate in general, but when it comes to sex, it's like the 8th house and Scorpio are the two things that really tell about somebody's sex drive. And so this is actually though in his 3rd house here. So, I'm actually kind of surprised with a 3rd house like this. You would think he would be a writer because he would actually be very good at writing. Let's see other things about Tiger's chart. He has some couple of bad or difficult difficult placements here. So Jupiter's not too well placed. That's actually in the 7th house in the sign of Pisces, which you would think would be pretty good for relationships. Saturn retrograde in the sign of Cancer. This is normally a difficult placement. So this in his 11th house usually makes somebody strive a lot harder than they normally would have to. Mars in Taurus, not too that's not too much of a difficult placement. So, it's really interesting when we take a look at his chart. We don't really see much. I don't see much in his chart that screams athlete. Normally, athletes have very strong, they have strong fire energy, and usually you see this in Aries or you see it in the sign here of Leo, but he has his sun here in the sign of Sagittarius, which could indicate that. Now, this is why I put the Navamsa chart in here. If you take a look, the sun, Mars, and Venus are all in the sign of Leo in the Navamsa chart, and we do have an accurate birth time for Tiger. Then you have Mercury, Jupiter, and the ascendant in Uranus all in the 1st house in the sign of this is interesting too, is Jupiter is debilitated in this 1st house in the sign of Aquarius, which Jupiter rules your morals. So somebody that has a debilitated Jupiter doesn't necessarily function, or they don't put a lot of value on ethical behavior. So it's kind of interesting looking at his chart too. So I can kind of see where he would just kind of be pushing and pushing and pushing and kind of push the ethics to the side. So also too, Capricorn here in the Navamsa chart, Capricorn is very goal oriented as well. So all right, moving on from Tiger Woods. Skippy says the U.S. and Canada are close to a Nafta deal. And of course, the key provision is no more dress up for Skippy, who kind of looks like an Aunt Jemima and a dashiki there. Didn't really work out too well for him. Anyway, so I bring this up because we are talking about the mundane chart and the inevitable restructuring of so much stuff in our world that's going on, especially in the United States. And of course, when we're talking trade, what happens in the United States and also a lot of stuff in general affects Canada as well. So looking at this Saturn, Moon, and Pluto combination, and Mars here in the sign of in the sign of Sagittarius, this is the 1st house of the United States, and as time goes on, a lot more planets are going to be working its way right into the sign of Sagittarius here in the 1st house of the United States. Another big indicator of restructuring is Pluto. So Pluto is all about upheaval, changes, sudden changes, kind of a little bit of a dictatorial vibe to it too. So we are going to be having seven planets in the sign of Sagittarius next December. So everything building up into this point is going to be kind of little bits and pieces. So I'm going to be bringing you charts that kind of show what I think is going to be like an inevitable structuring in the United States government. A couple scenarios that we're seeing even today, you know, the trade war between China and the United States. Maybe China might dump all the U.S. debt, you know, which may force the United States to have to restructure their debt. I really do see this coming in the form of a debt restructuring for the United States. So interesting stuff. We'll have to keep an eye on it as it unfolds. All right, so I love heavy metal and I love Phil Anselmo, and he's a scary looking dude, but man, I love Pantera. I grew up listening to Pantera. They were my favorite band in the 90s. I went to see them in concert, and I broke my knee in a Pantera mosh pit, which that part really did suck. And I was so wasted I was able to walk home from that. Not walk home, walk back to my ride, and that was probably about 8 blocks. So yeah, that hurt. But anyway, I call that my Pantera knee now. And of course, Phil Anselmo. Probably, I think he's one of my favorite lead men too. Of course, he did go a little bit overboard in a lot of shows. So, man, that was some wild stuff back in the 90s. So, and of course, he is the target of the lamest grudge ever in rock history. You know, I'm going to take Phil's side, and I think, you know, the Daryl needs to get over this stuff. I mean, I know his brother was shot, and it was unfortunate that stuff went down, but man, this band had a lot of talent. But if you think about it, though, this band breaking up probably saved Phil's life because he had to contend with his addictions. And of course, if you kind of look at the history of Pantera, even like the bass player Rex, man, he's got you know, a lot of drinking related issues right now. I'm trying to think of the one that he had, pancreatitis. So he drank so much that his pancreas isn't functioning. And honestly, the way Dimebag Daryl, Dimebag Daryl or Diamond Daryl back when they were glam rock, the way he was going, I'm not surprised that he probably would have died of cirrhosis of the liver. But I haven't taken a look at his chart. Today we're taking a look at Phil. So of course Phil was born in Louisiana, in New Orleans. So a lot of Gemini energy here. Mars, Venus, and the Sun all in the sign of Gemini, and then of course he has Jupiter, Pluto, and the Moon here in the sign. In the sign of Leo. This is awesome for a front man. I tell you, like, really front men are all about ego, and like the sign of Leo is all about ego. And when you have Jupiter and the Moon there, I mean, this really is a huge part of his personality. Now, the Gemini part, Geminis are all about thinking outside of the box. And so Phil had his stage presence was really aggressive, but he really knew how to hype up the crowd, probably too much, because, you know, drunk people get pushed around in the mosh pit. That was not fun. Let's see other factors of his chart. His Saturn is actually it's a fairly difficult placement. His Saturn is in Sunny, and it's also debilitated in the sign of Aries, and it's almost like a double debilitation here too, because Saturn in his Navamsa chart is Vargotama, which actually makes it partially can't. I'm sorry, I take that back. That actually, it doesn't cancel the debilitation, but it gives Saturn a little bit extra strength. So what it means is that as he aged, he kind of got used to the debilitated Saturn. Whereas, you know, if it would have gotten into like maybe in the sign of Libra, it's a sign of exaltation. Usually people are able to come over that debilitated Saturn. And what a debilitated Saturn does is it makes somebody lazy. You know, they kind of get used to things being handed to them, and you can kind of see a little bit of that in Phil's attitude. I mean, especially when he was younger, not so much while he was older, but when he was younger, he was really like, oh, how do I put it? Not ostentatious, but you know, he really liked to live the party life. And so another thing too that you see with that is like an afflicted moon here. And if you see his Neptune is squaring his moon, and so that's also very difficult for addiction. Looking at his Navamsa chart, though, I mean, you can see that his Venus is exalted in his Navamsa. So I don't think Phil is married, but the Navamsa chart generally takes it takes effect after the age of 36, and that was around the time that Pantera broke up. So, you know, he kind of went through a little bit of a restructuring then. So you see his exalted Venus here. That's actually very good for performance. Jupiter here is it's still in the sign of Gemini. No, I'm sorry. No, it is in the sign of Gemini. I thought it was here in Gemini up here in his regular Rossi chart. But here it's here in Leo. So yeah, and of course, this is kind of weird. Just like Tiger Woods, he has a lot of that Capricorn influence. So it's kind of interesting to see the synastry in some of the charts. Oh, and his Mercury is exalted too. But if you have an exalted Mercury and an exalted Venus, these two are actually opposed to each other, and that actually is very well because they also switch natural signs. So this gives a lot of strength to Phil as he grows up and he grows into himself. And he's actually about 50. He's going to be 50 in a couple months. So, hey, happy 50th birthday, Phil. So I just want to say, everybody, thank you so much for joining me today. And I hope you liked what you see. If you do, like and subscribe and share. And if you have any ideas or if you know anybody who's like a famous person, if you want me to cover their Vedic chart, go ahead and drop me a line at the email below. Otherwise, hopefully I will see you in a couple of days here.